Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here, wrapping up another week with our earnings on the radar video, right? So, feel like we've gotten in a good routine with these earnings on the radars, right? You guys know what to expect. I like doing these videos on Fridays just because it kind of gets us all in like the same mentality, right? Kind of get that prep work in, so you kind of, you know, when you're looking ahead, you're kind of getting that game plan together. Uh, and right now, it's super important because we're just about at the beginning of earnings season. Okay, um, and actually this coming week, so on the 12th, so like the final day, so this Friday is actually the unofficial kickoff to the quarter. Okay, as we get like the banks, so it's good. So like these game plans, kind of, you get into the mentality, start thinking about the names that are coming up, start the planning, the strategies. So that's why I like to do them like the week before, over the weekend, so you guys can like spend some time going over like the patterns and like the numbers, and then hopefully it's helpful for you guys because I feel like it's helpful for me. All right. So Monday's an easy one. Want to know why? Because there is not a single company scheduled before the open or after the close. And it seems like companies just decided that the markets were closed. Um, But it's at the point of the month where we might see some early guidance. Okay, I mean it's typical. The typical time is usually like the first or 2 weeks right before earnings season starts. So when a lot of these names are preparing the financials, they have preliminary numbers. So that's why you see like so in this case it's the beginning of April. So like first 2 weeks of April, and January is the first couple weeks of January, right? First couple weeks of October, so on and so forth. So maybe we'll get some unscheduled guidance. Unfortunately, there's obviously no way to really prepare for that because you don't really know who's going to guide and who's not. But it could be something worth trading. It could give some opportunities. So definitely keep an eye on that. All right, Tuesday before the open, there's only one small cap industrial name, LNN, which is the chart I have up here, Lindsay. Um, I mean, the further out I go, you can see it's it's really not a consistent mover, right? And it really hasn't done anything for a few years. So I'm just going to leave that alone. Like that's the problem. Sometimes you get antsy, right? I'm ready for earnings season. I'm ready to go here. I'm ready to start getting busier. But it's tempting to like jump into all of these just because you're looking for something to do. And honestly, like stock like this, it just doesn't seem like it's worth it. It definitely could move, but it doesn't have a strong, consistent history of moving, and I don't really like to chart one way or the other, so I'm just going to leave that one alone. Uh, After the close Wednesday is WD-40. Again, another like chemical, industrial, however you want to characterize it. It had a pretty good move off the October low, but it's finally starting to show some signs of weakness, hanging out underneath its 200-day. It's pricing in about 9.5 points. It's not really a volatile name, but it is kind of interesting. Maybe you get like a little bit of a technical breakdown, right? Like it's first sign of weakness. It had a really monster move last year. Uh, Valuation's a little stretched. Last quarter was only in line. It got hit off inline numbers, showing some weakness. So maybe it's speculative bearish bet. The problem with this one though is that not only is like the stock kind of thin, so it won't do a whole lot of volume, but the options are pretty thin too. There's not a lot of liquidity in the option market. So as much as I think that it might be a mover, it's really going to be determined. Like whether I do a trade on this is really going to determine like what the liquidity ends up being like. Maybe if things get a little bit busier ahead of earnings, it gives some opportunity. But just looking at the option chains today, I mean, I can tell you that there's just not a lot of volume and there's not a lot of interest in it. All right, Wednesday before the bell is Delta. So Delta probably would have been a bigger name, so one of the more interesting names next week. But then they gave guidance a couple days ago, and you can see the stock absolutely ripped. So first things first, it's pricing in about 230, so it's still pricing in a pretty good sized move. I mean, it's not monster, but I mean, after this run, I mean, it's going to be a little bit tougher. Uh, I talked about during our last option session how I really like to focus on the first key report in each sector. And the reason I like to do that is because those tend to be the most volatile. Because it's like the first look at the numbers for the group, right? There's still a lot of uncertainty when like the before like the first name report. So with Delta scheduled to report this coming week, had they not given guidance, then there could have been a greater percentage move, right? Because people didn't really know what to expect, and that would have impacted UAL, AAL, JetBlue, and so forth. And then what happens is like the reason why I like to play those first ones too is then because that kind of sets the benchmark. Or that's why I like to focus on those first ones too, because like that'll set the benchmark for all the other ones. Again, the problem with Delta is that they gave guidance already, preliminary first quarter guidance, and it's already had a big move. So I'm not really in love with the setup, and I don't really know what I would do with it. I guess if you were looking at it, you could still maybe look at like UAL or AAL because they haven't had like the same magnitude of a move, right? They're still kind of underneath some levels, even though like Delta has blown through like the February top. So if anything, maybe look at those two. But right now I'm leaning more towards leaving Delta alone just because of this recent pop here. After the close Wednesday is Bed Bath & Beyond, and actually this is one of the more interesting setups next week. It's priced in about 240, so a little under 2.5. It's trying to turn the corner after just a really horrible period. I mean, like the further back I go, the worse it looks. But you can see, I mean, it's trying to turn the corner, right? So it actually had a pretty big move after the January results, and then this recent jump was off of activist news. So it had like a first move and then a secondary move, and this will be the first time it's going to be reporting earnings above its 200-day since 2016. So it has a little momentum. Pretty heavily shorted. I mean, at one point it was trading at like basically that it was like it was going out of business. I feel like at 240 that there's some room right there for like a straddle or a strangle, a volatility strategy, right? Because you got gaps above and you got a big gap below. The first gap is pretty close to being closed right here, but then you have like this ton of room higher, right? Just because it's been in such like a severe, steady yearly downtrend that any momentum from here could really start to build fast. So, I guess like I would say 240. I mean, I feel like there could be room on top of that. Maybe like not a ton of room. So look at maybe spreads or even some sort of longer dated options, right? Just to get the risks down a little bit. But I do think that this is one of the better setups, and I'm thinking volatility strategy. So either straddle or strangle potentially on this one for next week. All right, moving through the week pretty quick here. Thursday before the open is Fastenal. So this is an industrial part supplier. If you're not familiar with it, it's priced in 4 points. Again, this one's not always that consistent, but the chart looks really good. You can see, let me go back a little bit further. You can see that it's kind of breaking through like the top of what had been resistance, right? I'd like this really nice like upward channel trend, right? You can see really well defined, and it's starting to break through it, so it's starting to accelerate out of it. And it's coming off a decent quarter. So it was a decent quarter back in January when a lot of industrials were struggling, right? So had a decent quarter, good move, held on to it, built. So I'm thinking maybe a bullish continuation. Looking for like a pop and continuation out of like the top of the trend here. What you could look at is Grainger, GWW, which is a pretty closely correlated peer. and that's working right on the top of its range too. It's been lagging a little bit. Obviously, you can see it's not at its 52-week high, so it could be some catch up there. Fastenal's good. Maybe people jump into GWW ahead of their results. Okay, nothing. There's actually nothing scheduled for Thursday after the close. And then Friday before the open's the main event of the week, and that's when you have the banks, which kick off earnings season. So you have J.P. Morgan, which is pricing in 3.30 or so, it's like 3.25, and then Wells Fargo, which is pricing in like $1.70. And honestly, like these, I feel like these are the two key names. Actually, kind of similar setups overall, right? So, they're not identical. Wells Fargo's lagging a little bit and has more of a weight on it just because of their CEO. So the CEO just stepped down. So I feel like that might be a little bit heavier. But actually, like these were two of like the weaker big bank reports last quarter. So they didn't perform particularly well. And in the aftermath of earnings, they didn't rally as quickly as some of the other ones. So like the Bank of America was a leader, whereas it took J.P. Morgan a while to go, and then Wells Fargo actually really hasn't gone much. So I am torn with what to do with these. The recent performance has been so challenging. They looked like they were going to go, and then they fell apart. Obviously, like the move in rates, like the inverted yield curve, is going to hurt these things. Uh, I feel like J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo, first ones to go, right? Usually, how I approach that is whichever ones don't report this week or next week are the ones that I'll look at, right? Because odds are, with J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo reporting, you're going to get a move in Citi, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, right? And the way those options are set up, it's like they're not, those contracts aren't going to be as expensive as the J.P. Morgan and Wells Fargo because they don't have the catalyst, right? So I hoping that there's a little bit more clarity, so like the setups look a little bit better over the next like 2, 3, 4 days, and give a little bit better idea what to do with these. Because right now, they're kind of in the middle of their ranges, under some key averages. I mean, Wells Fargo is particularly right. It's hanging on to a bunch of key near-term moving averages, so it doesn't look particularly good. J.P. Morgan is better, but still not great. So I guess I'd be leaning slightly more bullish. But so of the two, probably like look at J.P. Morgan, slightly more bullish. But honestly, might the way to play it might be to go through like Bank of America calls or Citi or even Goldman Sachs, right? Which has come all the way back after shaking us out. So like the banks tend to trade together, pretty closely correlated. Obviously, there's differences in performance, but I do feel like the most of the banks react to the numbers of the others. So that's probably how I'm going to do it. Haven't really figured out which way I want to go, which way I want to lean, and I'm hoping like over the next few days there's a little bit cleaner of a setup that forms. Maybe I'll follow like the options, see what the positioning looks like, and then we'll go from there. All right. So that's that. So you can see not a ton of names scheduled, but it's the quiet before the storm, right? You have earnings season officially get to go next week, and then like the following 2 to 3 weeks are going to be absolutely slammed with one after the other, like big name. So it's going to pick up real fast. So what I'll be watching is again any unscheduled guidance, and then it's just going to be prep work, just planning, like identifying trends, identifying like interesting setups, and then just preparing for the busy action to really get going. All right. So I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy, rest up, relax, and I'll talk to you all on Monday.